This game abused me, but at the same time, it made me appreciate FromSoftware's craft even more. This game demands a lot out of you. This game is one of the most difficult hard sword games that I've ever played in my entire life. I'm not joking. No, for real. I was done after this game, guys. My eyes were blood red after beating it, with a burst of euphoric feeling that was only left. This game that I'm talking about is Sekiro Shadows Die Twice. Why is Sekiro such a classic already, and the dominant one among them all? It has to be the brutal combat and the design elements that surround that central pillar. Sekiro for me presents an immaculate sword fighting system that is entirely dependent on the player's skills and reflexes. This combat is a heart pumping fest, my guys. The blocking and the movement, really fast movement, really puts your eyes on the screen. But at the same time, it is rather a simple system that gives you not more than a few options to attack. But it's ingenuous parry system that makes this game special. No stamina bars featured in prior FromSoft games like the Dark Souls series. And it makes battles a test of holding a posture for the longest time you need to parry enemy attacks just before they land to take a jab at the enemy's posture meter. And doing so continuously is what will eventually fill out that meter, we all know that, and leave them open to a fatal blow. In that sense, Sekiro resembles more of a racing game and a constant focus. You have to consistently axe each turn and bend on the track to have a chance of winning the race. It is like you are in this anime duel fight, or that certain Star Wars lightsaber fights where they are completely locked the fuck in. Sekiro has the most difficult combat learning curve in the series yet, definitely. But for some reason they also decided to make the learning process as painful as possible. So I actually really appreciate that from software. Like after playing the Dark Souls 3, I really appreciated that is exactly what I needed. The benefits of deflecting in particular are clear right off the damn bat. In the tutorial it teaches you how to attack, deflect and guard, which is what you will do to win like 90% of fights in this whole game. Enemies can be posture broken with just a single deflection and it feels really good. I think its mechanics are explained fairly succinctly, which is also really good. I found the tutorial, to be honest, a lot more helpful if you actually have things in the game to test your learned mechanics on. I do remember Bloodborne in particular hiding its tutorial messages away in an area of the Hunter stream, and for a new player it can be easy to forget all those rules when there is nothing outside of some text pop-ups to reinforce them. Sekiro Shadow Die Twice, a lot would say, is the black sheep of the Soulsborne games. Now I have seen this a lot on this platform. On the periphery it treads familiar ground, but at its core it offers a notable different combat system experience, boosting a combat system that demands respect, even till this day. No other Soulsborne title for me does the same degree, really. This isn't a different take on the formula, this is a rewriting the rules of engagement, and the way it all comes together is uniquely brilliant for me. To even include it under the Soulsborne umbrella is a point of contention for some, and you know what, guys? I don't give a fuck. The term black sheep often evokes negative connotations, but in this case of Sekiro it is quite the opposite, but it depends on who you ask, right? Sekiro's difficulty is no secret. Its gameplay is extremely notoriously challenging with an extremely steep learning curve, so much so that there were journalists that demanded an easy mode on this game. Can you believe that? I completely disagree with an easy mode to be added on in the game, but at the same time I do understand that there were calls for it. You see, Sekiro's combat system is of a singular nature. I'm gonna be completely forward here with you guys. I do actually like Sekiro's approach much better than throwing a few easy Ashina soldiers at you, but also putting you against a mini-boss level enemy right away as well. The encounter of Kenichiro in a cutscene sets the rest of the story in a good motion. This scene is definitely my favorite in all of the games, solely for a neat little tidbit of visual storytelling. When Wolf reaches for his sword, he misses at first and has to readjust his grip. I really admire subtle details in video games like this, guys. Like this scene reflects the nuance of these characters. It is indeed a very human moment. Wolf has been out of practice for 3 years and it's really made me stressed out for a bit because Kenichiro just looks like no joke. It's natural that his technical skills and muscle memory has deteriorated a lot over that time. This damn scene really sells on how intimidating Kenichiro really actually is. He comes off much more prepared and confident and capable than Wolf does. I would say that this does come off as an actual boss fight and that you can actually win, but Kenichiro is far more complex and difficult for a new player for beat. So it's more or less a scripted loss, if you guys know what I mean. So what is the purpose of this? I do think it is to build up tension for when you have to fight him later in the game. Kenichiro is very imposing, and given that he shares his last name with the Shina land, you will assume that he is a big deal around here. If you do manage to get a glimpse of at some of his combos, it's easy to get pretty overwhelmed. And that does go a long way in creating some nervousness in the player, which will make the end of payoff much more satisfying. Wolf gets his arm slide off not long before, will be brought to the Shina outskirts, and this is where the tutorial ends. The first levels in the Soulsborne series tend to be some of the best in their respective games, both from a pure level design standpoint, but also because of how they lay the foundation for the rest of the game. Ashina Outskirts mostly continues this trend, but it's difficult to explain why. Not because it's a bad area, but because Sekiro has less variety in its layouts, which makes it harder to discuss the unique strengths that each area has. This is what I mean by this, okay? Many levels share the same or similar design principles with each other. If you stripped away all the visual elements from Sekiro's levels, you'll be left with something that feels relatively samey throughout. Like compare this to something like Bloodborne, right? Where there's a mixture of complex mazes like Central Yarnum along with very straightforward areas like Hemwick Chanel Lane, and it might be easier to see what I'm getting at now. To be completely clear, this isn't a slight against Sekiro because this game has a different focus completely. Levels have been a lot more streamlined. What we typically see is a series of self contained zones full of enemies that you have to clear out before moving into the next zone. These zones usually only connects to each other one way and it's unlikely that you will sequence break through them unless you intentionally start running past everything. This design reflects the stealth component of Sekiro's gameplay. Methodically, clearing a room of enemies and moving into the next in a straightforward manner isn't so unusual, and it will be easy to see the game nudging you into that sort of mindset as you progress throughout the outskirts. I conveniently ended up dying for the first time in a small stretch of land soon after this, so let's use that as opportunity to introduce how death works in Sekiro. I would consider death a part of the overarching healing system in the game, much like the bosses. Wolf essentially has multiple health bars. If you die with a node of resurrection power available, you can revive with half of your health and continue fighting. Basically, Shadow died twice. You don't truly die unless you die without one of those nodes. I did find it to be a bit of a strange system, to be honest, and while there aren't any major issues, zipping through some easy to transfer level designs leads us to the best part for me of Sekiro's early game. Yep, you guys know what I'm gonna get at. The samurai general fights. I know some players hate these general fights. Like, no, they really do. Like, it's just like a constant, difficulty that really bounce upon you. I love this mini boss. Well, mini bosses. And it is actually genius that FromSoftware did this. These generals all basically just Kenichiro if he was more of a puss boy than he already is, which is actually great. Because Inner Kenichiro is one of the best fights in any video game ever. Now, this is an easy mode training dummy enemy to teach the player Sekiro combat. It is really funny that not only do I mind that this mini-boss is a copy and paste throughout the world, but it gives the player more of a training session and it makes you comfortable with the bosses that lies ahead. Sekiro does have some of the best bosses under the Soulsborne umbrella. And I know some fans would say it is Dark Souls 3 or the best is Elden Ring, and you are not wrong. But Sekiro is up there with them. Like Lady Butterfly, for me, was very unique, and here is why. Lady Butterfly is one of the easiest bosses in the game. But despite that, in my first playthrough, there was no boss who killed me as many times as this canine wielding, bingo, planing, fucking illusion summoning old lady. This fight's atmosphere is great. Lady Butterfly has the wow factor to it. The burning basement with the golden Buddha statue. The music, it all comes together so beautifully. Mechanics wise, she is probably the most defensive boss in this game. She will switch to deflecting almost instantly, meaning dealing vitality damage is incredibly difficult. She also has a bad posture recovery. Not difficult to dodge the mods, but it just stops the pace of the fight for me personally. Lady Butterfly, for me, for the most part, has a solid AI unless you step account her, because if you do that, she has no idea how to handle your attacks. You can get her in a theoretically infinite damage loop, absolutely slaughtering her vitality. The fight does, however, end on a strong note. The other one boss that was also really cinematic for me was the Divine Dragon. This boss fight really reminded me of Elden Ring. Kenichiro and the Divine Dragon are the only two fights that have had a constant build up throughout the game. Wolf and Kuro's powers are closely tied with the Divine Dragon, and a little bit of curiosity was tumbling around at the back of my mind, wondering if we would actually get to see the source of that power looks like. Well, we do, as you can see, and it managed to subvert whatever expectations I had conjured up and presented us with a absolutely stunning spectacular fight. I can imagine some players being disappointed that the boss of such a legendary area doesn't have anything particular challenging about it. But the boss fights have been such a great strength of the game prior to this that I think they're justified in placing something a bit gimmicky in order to focus on the theme and visuals. The case with Sekiro, every boss fits some sort of role or niche that pushes the limits of the combat system, and the only thing it's been lacking so far is a pure spectacle boss. The other boss fight I want to talk about this one is the Guardian Ape is probably my favorite boss in the game indefinitely. The Battle of the Guardian Ape feels like something out of a cinematic movie masterpiece. Arguably the most well animated boss in the entire game. Good animation work is a big reason why attack telegraphs in this game are so clear, but as demonstrated by the boss, it has implications outside of that. Now, you don't necessarily need movie like shots or extreme graphical fidelity to invoke that cinematic feel. The movement of the Great Guardian Ape drive its attacks patterns and behavior. The overwhelming visual aspects are intertwined with the gameplay and how you respond to his attacks, which takes much better advantage of the medium. Also, the Guardian Ape is probably the most unpredictable enemy in the entire game. Now, personally for me, I try to go into every game with as few expectations as possible, especially if it isn't some sort of sequel. But even with that mindset, I can understand why a subset of Soulsborne fans may have been disappointed with Sekiro. It isn't a natural evolution of its predecessors the same way Bloodborne and Elden Ring have been. And if you go in expecting something that resembles a Souls game, you're going to find it very weird and awkward to play. On the other hand, I think it's admirable when a studio is willing to take some risk with their products, especially when you consider how many resources have to go into a game's development. FromSoft has gained so much status and respect over the years and years that even if Sekiro somehow flopped, they'd probably be fine, but a part of myself respects this game solely for the sheer confidence that they have put into this game. Sekiro is the great outlier, and I really hope it's not the last. Elden Ring has taken the world by storm, but there are still countless opportunities for more tightly focused adventures. Sekiro, although, was the hardest from soft game for me, but the fact that Sekiro is not objectively the hardest of the hard Souls games, nor the easiest, but what it does is present a very difficult fantasy of difficulty than those other games, and it's one uniquely suited to my particular obsession. It's a game that presents a seamlessly insurmountable brick wall and tells you that you can in fact surmount it, not by outleveling it, but by getting to know the brick wall so intimately, understanding it so perfectly, that eventually the wall will feel like an old friend. If it comes to Sekiro, guys, at the end your knuckles may be blooded and your shoulder may be bruised and stiffed, but you will realize that the wall has opened up a door to you specifically, and you can simply walk through. The brick wall of difficulty won't be limiting, it will be liberating, and you will feel liberated by this game.